What's up, citizens? Welcome to City Square Podcast, where we talk with everyday people about faith and work. My name is John, and if this is your first time tuning in, you already know, please take a quick moment to subscribe to the channel, like the video, click the bell, and as the conversation's going, don't hesitate to leave any questions or comments down below. Today, my guest needs no introduction. It's the ever-famous Marc. What's going on, man?
Hey, what's up, John? Yeah, I've made the rounds here a few times, but I think this is my first time with you, so glad to be doing it.
Yeah, man, yeah. It's good to change it up every once in a while, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having
me. Do you know how many episodes you've done so far?
So, like official City Square podcast episodes, I think 3 maybe, and then one kind of unofficial one, I think. So somewhere in the ballpark of 3 or 4.
Okay, there you go, man. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool, man. If we keep it up, we might have to put you on the payroll, so we'll try not to. Yeah.
You keep having me, you might scare all your listeners away.
No. But the other day, man, you went viral on Facebook. You had a post, the man that hit, I think close to 100 comments, man. I think we're looking at like 70. Yeah, it was pretty intense, man. But you had a post. I'll go ahead and just read it for everybody, where you said, stop teaching boys to marry before seminary, and so enter into vocations they have no intent to fulfill. What got you on that kick?
So what it was exactly that caused me to decide to write that day, I don't even remember, but for a little bit of background or context, I guess, is that it's a pretty popular trend, at least within my neck of the woods, which is the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, to encourage young boys, and I say boys intentionally, and we'll get into that, to marry basically as early as possible, and especially those young boys who intend to enter into the office of the ministry, and so go to seminary after undergrad. They're really, I don't know if pressured is the right word. They're really encouraged, though, to get hitched, and even in some cases, to get married while still in undergrad, and start families before entering seminary, and situations like that. So my post was really just kind of I guess I don't want to say counter, because I'm not opposed to early marriage by any means. I'm just trying to offer a more balanced perspective.
So you're not against early marriage, you're just against pastors getting married. That's what the comments said.
Is that what's? Yeah, I guess some people did construe it that way. Actually, now that you mention it, but no, I'm not against pastors being married at all. I mean, Luther, the greatest theologian since the apostles, his big thing was against priestly celibacy, right? So
he got married despite the devil, right?
Footsteps as closely as possible.
Wasn't his thing he got married to spite the devil?
Yeah, I think so. I think something like that.
But gotcha, man. So you said a second ago, what was it? You said you didn't call them men, you called them young boys on purpose.
Yeah. So I did use kind of a lot of specific terms in that post. And really what I'm getting at and the perspective I'm trying to approach this from is from the perspective of particularly a Lutheran doctrine of vocation. And so in this case, we'd be talking about the vocation of husband. And, that vocation, with it come particular duties. So when you enter into the vocation of husband, you are entering into and, you ought to be willing to fulfill the duties that come with that particular vocation. Well, a young guy, a young boy, a young guy coming out of college, I think for most people these days, they're either, they're taking on debt to go through college, or they're being funded by someone else. And in one of the previous episodes that I did with Micah, the topic was on manhood or masculinity and what is that? And we talked about this a little bit, and that, manhood doesn't just happen. You actually have to attain to it. So young boys, they don't just grow into men. And so all of this is kind of playing into what I was getting at with that post, that a young guy coming out of college, getting married, hasn't really built anything up, hasn't really done any work yet, is not independent, but is still entirely dependent on someone or some other people, and then enters into this vocation of marriage and then goes into seminary, and then it's not only him that's completely dependent on others, but he puts his whole family, that is himself and his wife, into this state of dependence on others, so that he's not actually fulfilling the duties of a husband at that point. The most obvious one is to be a provider for his family, for his wife. And so I think that, we're not really, or at least those who are. So, well, let me back up a little bit, because I know this is kind of a reaction to our current culture, which says, get married, or finish up college and put off marriage until you're like wealthy or something. I don't know how that goes, but this encouragement for young people to marry like as quickly as possible is a reaction to that. But what we're not doing is we're not taking into account these other important aspects, like the doctrine of vocation, which says that, if you're going to enter into this vocation, you've got duties to fulfill. And if you're not doing those things, you're actually sinning, because these vocations are callings, are instituted by God, and they come with specific kind of requirements, if you will. So
Yeah.
So this is where I'm coming from. We're not teaching these boys to first become men and then so enter into the vocation of husband. We're teaching them to get married, live in this state of utter dependence, put your family in this state of utter dependence, where you're not actually providing for your family because you can't, because you're off doing your studies or whatever. And that's most cases. I think that it's accurate to say that's most cases. There are probably some guys who, they get jobs and they work their way through seminary, and that's fantastic. But that's not what I'm seeing for the most part.
For sure, man. For sure. So you're not
Did I answer your
saying for
question? I
no,
kind of
yeah, you're
rambled
good,
a
man. You're
little bit
good.
there, I
You're
think.
good. So you're not saying that a young man needs to like have everything figured out and in line to get married, correct?
No, but
At this, but what you're also saying is you should have like a developed sense of like responsibility and some kind of, I hate using the word independence, but like some kind of, you should have some kind of independence, right? You shouldn't be like living off of your parents or living off of some kind of system or something along those lines. You should be moving in the right direction. And part of that evidence is you have a job that is meaningful and useful, right?
yeah, absolutely, all of that. And, to maybe even put it more forthrightly,
Yeah.
a way that one person put it was that manhood begins when a boy ceases to be dependent and becomes someone who can provide and build. So,
Yeah. Okay.
my question would be, in what sense is a person who puts himself into and his family, his wife, into this position, in what sense is he actually being a man,
Yeah.
or exercising, or I can't think of a good word, masculinity, masculine trait, which is to be a provider, to give, to contribute to his
Yeah.
family. That's my question. That not really, no one was really on that thread answering, I don't think, or at least not satisfactorily.
Okay. So, I think what you're talking about is, so I know like a lot of your focus and concern is the LCMS because that's where you exist. But I remember when I was I was looking into going to seminary after I graduated college and after my wife and I had just been married for a little bit. Um, I was looking at going to seminary and I was trying to figure out what that would look like. And I went and visited one up in your neck of the woods. And I remember that a lot of the guys there that were chasing like their MDiv and that stuff, they didn't work while they were pursuing that, and their wives filled a lot of positions at the seminary. And so, like, whether it had been secretary, coordinator, or whatever it was, a lot of those admin roles at the seminary were filled by the wives of the guys who were students there while they were working, like, on their MDiv or whatever. And what was interesting about that was that was encouraged because in that situation, you got a significant discounts on your like tuition and fees and stuff. And like that seems to be like the common thing. Like it's more of a cultural cultural thing than it is like a denominational thing. At least that's how it appears for me. And I always thought that was kind of strange. Like it just didn't make sense to me that like if the expectation is that like if the expectation is that the man is the provider of the home, then why is it that the institutions that are raising up the men to lead the church, which is supposed to be like a pillar of the culture, teaching this way of living, but we're also making like a really strange, bizarre exception for it, right? Like the man should be with the provider of the home unless he's going to class. I was like, that's just weird to me, man.
Yeah. So, and on that thread, or on that post, I don't. There's really only one person who kind of brought up these kinds of objections or situations. She wasn't really objecting, as much as she was just trying to, I think, understand my position and how I would respond to some of those scenarios. And at least at this time, and I haven't really, fleshed it out completely, but there does seem to be a difference between a young guy, a young boy, so fresh out of college, went to college straight after high school. So he's like what, 22 or something, out of college, hasn't really worked a day in his life yet, because maybe he did a little bit of work in high school or something, like fast food, right? But nothing like substantial enough to be financially independent and provide for himself and a family. Um, and then this young guy gets married and goes into seminary, and so what happens in the LCMS, particularly at our seminaries, at least right now and for the past couple of years, is that they are tuition. And I think I'm speaking accurately about this. I could be wrong on some minor details maybe, but as I understand it, tuition is covered by donors, like 100%, I believe, which is good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But there does seem to be a difference between like a guy in that kind of situation entering into seminary, and he and his wife, his family, are completely dependent on others. So, so again, my question is, what exactly makes this young boy a man? At what point did he actually enter into manhood, and start living as a man? When did he cease to be dependent and become someone who can provide and build? I don't see it. But on the other hand, but what about the situation like a guy and his wife who have been married for many years, and he's been faithfully providing, fulfilling his vocation as husband toward his wife. He's there's no question this guy, he is, he's a man. He's a masculine person. And then decides to, in agreement with his wife, he decides to pursue a second vocation, or a second career. And for a time, she provides. She provides economically for the family, for him to go to seminary to study, knowing that when he gets out, he'll be in the office of the ministry. He'll be back into a position to again support and provide for his family. There seems to be, to me, a distinction there. I think because like this guy, he doesn't just lose his manhood just because, right? And and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong either with women contributing economically to the household either. So, which I don't know if anyone kind of accused me of that, but that's not what I'm saying at all either. I think there are just a lot of factors at play here that this simplistic approach of get married as quickly as possible because there's nothing wrong with getting married. So, and whether you do it early and are prepared or not, just do it. So I think we're just not taking a lot of these factors into account with that kind of simplistic approach to it. And then to make another distinction, I think there's a difference again between that first scenario that I mentioned, and then also like a guy who enters into the ministry. This did come up on the thread. Someone brought up an objection kind of like this. So there's a difference between a man or a boy, a guy, a husband, and his wife being totally dependent on others, and a single guy entering into seminary and being dependent for a time on the generosity of others, knowing, because the church can do this. They can put guys through seminary, but what we're asking them to do is to put guys through seminary and support his entire family at the same time too. I think there's a difference there, because putting a single guy through seminary, recognizing that he is going to give back, hopefully manyfold, when he graduates, and enters into the office. I think there's just another difference there. So lots of different situations, and really the one that I was wanting to address is very specific, that a young guy has not yet even been initiated into manhood, yet enters into this vocation of husband, and then is not even encouraged to do the most basic duties of a husband, such as to provide for his family.
So I'm curious about this, because one of the things you keep going back to is like dependency. Is that the dependency on the generosity of others and that kind of thing, right? And so, and maybe the LCMS, y'all do things different than everybody else does. But what about so do your missionaries have to fundraise?
Yes. Yeah.
So is that a problem?
Missionaries fundraising.
Because you're dependent on a lot of people then.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I don't know a whole lot about our missionary thing. That is an interesting question, though. So let me. Okay, so one of the guys that I mentioned in a previous podcast with Micah on the whole manhood topic is Jeff Hemmer, and he's the one who wrote that book titled Man Up. I have it right here, actually. And I do think, I mean, it's the best book that I've read so far on the topic. But he makes this absolute blanket statement. And he says, when a wife has to leave the care of her children to others so she can get a job that provides a paycheck, it's an indictment of her husband's ability to be the provider. It's contrary to man's nature to be provided for. He needs a companion, a helper for whom he can provide. Now, whether one agrees with that or not, I mean, it should at least give a person pause when he hears something like that. And, so my question would be, okay, well, so how would that apply in this case, like a missionary? Well, okay, a missionary is doing the work of his own fundraising, whereas that's not really the way that it works for our seminarians. They just kind of go there and get a free ride. In fact, I was at our church's annual men's retreat just about a month or so ago, and the guy who we had come be our speaker, he was actually telling us that he worked he worked in that position. So I guess the seminary has a specific position, and that person's job is basically to go around and ask people for money for the seminary. So
yeah.
So here we have the seminarians not even doing the hard work of getting donors. We have someone who's on the payroll doing that work for them. So, and if I do understand it correctly, our missionaries are the ones, they have to go around, they have to, they have to make trips, they have to raise money. And if they don't, I don't really know what happens. But then they still go do work. They go do missionary work.
So,
whereas, our seminarians, they're not, as far as I can tell, working. I wouldn't really call the education work. Would you? I don't know.
What I call, in the context of our conversation, no. Seminary school is work, but like in the context of our conversation, it does not fit the description of what we're calling work.
Not producing wealth in any way to be able to provide or support someone.
But so providing wealth, are we saying like you're exchanging goods for money is providing wealth?
What I would say is that it requires wealth to sustain a household.
Yeah.
And, a person who's just strictly going to school is not producing the kind of wealth necessary to sustain a household.
How many? And so, like, make sure I understand you correctly. Part of the frustration is young guys are going to seminary, and they're mooching, and they're not turning back around and using that education, correct?
Well, no, that's not really my complaint. I guess you could call my complaint. I don't think I would call it abstract. It's not abstract, and I don't think I'm being like an idealist either. I think what I'm just trying to do is that we teach properly, because what we're doing, or what we're not doing, is teaching these young boys what it actually means to be a man, to be a husband, to be a father. What we're saying is, you can get married, you can enter into the vocation of husband, you can enter into the vocation of father, and you can go to school and someone else will take care of you. You don't have to work, do your studies, you'll be taken care of. And again, it's just, and I do think there are ramifications for that. I didn't go into any of that. I was trying to just strictly approach it from this particular perspective. Now, I didn't that actually the pastors that our seminaries do produce are worse off for it. I could make that argument, and I would make that argument, but that's not the one that I was making there.
For sure.
But I do think that is actually the case.
How much does like an MDiv at an LCS seminary cost?
Oh, I have no idea. A lot of money, I'm assuming. And you know what? It doesn't even, and then it doesn't just stop there with the paid tuition, like, because I don't think their housing needs are paid for, and so that has to come from somewhere else. And again, this just highlights the fact that you are putting your family into a position of utter dependence on other. Who actually is fulfilling the role of husband in that kind of situation? If to provide for one's family is the role, is the husband's role, and the guy's not doing it, well, who's the husband in that situation?
So, how does it change, man?
How does it change? Well, one person on there, there were basically two kinds of objections to what I was saying. And the one we kind of talked about a little bit already, where, she asked some of the tougher questions. Well, what exactly are you does providing consist of, or how are you defining masculinity? Those I think are the good questions.
Yeah.
But the response or responses that I got more often than that was along the lines of, well, I'll read you one. So one guy said, delaying marriage and fatherhood for the sake of money is the world's way. It has been devastating. Let's encourage young, fruitful couples and vocations into the holy office. Nothing matures a man better than being a husband and a father. And being a pastor is very much to be a husband to the parish and a father to the parishioners. Now, there's a lot there, but for the first part, delaying marriage and fatherhood for the sake of money, that's not what I'm suggesting. So it's a total straw man. I would not say that. What I would say is, if you want to enter seminary, count the cost, as Jesus puts it. Count the cost. Will you be able to fulfill the vocation of husband, or not? If not, either don't enter into the vocation of husband until after seminary, or don't go to seminary and do something else. It's just, I think it's pretty, from my perspective, straightforward. Like, you gotta choose. You just have to make a choice, and we got to teach our young boys to make wise choices, or to encourage them. Okay, if you do want to enter into seminary and you do want to get married, you'd better be prepared to work your butt off so that you can live with a good conscience in the vocation of husband while doing your studies too. I think in a lot of cases, like, our boys, probably they do have good consciences because, well, they're being taught improperly. They're not being taught correctly about this idea of vocation. So, but we teach them rightly, and then we teach them how they can live virtuously and with good consciences within those vocations. And speaking of vocation, we need to teach properly on vocation, because we're simply not in this. I don't know a whole lot about how, like, the Reformed camp approaches this topic, but so vocation, we talk about this a lot in the Lutheran Church.
We like a lot of what Luther says about vocation.
What's that?
We like a lot of what Luther says about vocation.
Oh, good. Me too.
Yeah. Shocker.
So, and we talk about it a lot, but actually the way that vocation is popularly understood in, I guess I'll just say modern Lutheranism, and I guess I could speak especially regarding the LCMS, since that's the synod I'm part of. We actually, it's the popular understanding of it is a little off, and it's one of our professors at our Fort Wayne Seminary who pointed this out, that we really actually have the LCMS, that is, a kind of charismatic approach to the doctrine of vocation. And what I mean is, the way a lot of people understand it is, so they understand this idea of vocation very broadly, and in a way, situationally, so that one kind of just discerns his vocation, his callings from God, by his situation. So So what one writer says, and this is the guy who's really a uh, a popularizer of this idea in the LCMS. He says a vocation is not something we choose for ourselves. Rather, it is given by God, who calls us to a particular work or station. God gives each individual unique talents, skills, and inclinations. He also puts each individual in a unique set of external circumstances, which are understood as having been providentially arranged by God. Since vocation is not self-chosen, it can be known also through the actions of others. Getting offered a job, being elected to an office, and finding someone who wants to marry you are all clues to vocation. Essentially, your vocation is to be found in the place you occupy in the present. This is a Lutheran writer, but one of our seminary professors pointed out that this position is little different from Rick Warren's own view of vocation, which he espoused in his book, The Purpose-Driven Life, the premise of which is that it takes about 40 days to discern what God is calling you to do. So that's actually not Luther's. Yeah, that's actually not Luther's doctrine of vocation. And the way that this applies is that what a lot of these young guys are probably thinking on this basis is that they are serving the vocation of student, which there is no vocation of student properly understood from a Lutheran perspective. Vocations are those stations which God himself has instituted in Scripture. So things like husband, father, son, daughter, wife, worker. Those are the God ordained, the God instituted vocations, and we can enter into them or not enter into them. So some of them we don't have a choice. So like, I didn't have a choice to be a son. I was born into that, but I did have a choice whether or not I was going to get married, and whether or not to have kids. So so that's the second thing. We need to be, I think, in the Lutheran Church, especially, need to be teaching this doctrine properly. And when we do, we can take a more balanced approach, which I think is what I'm offering here, because it's not wrong to marry, and it's not wrong, absolutely, to not marry. And Paul himself says, well, he wishes all people were not married like he like him, right? At one point. So yeah, I think we've adopted an extreme response, an extreme reactionary position to the culture, and we need to kind of scale it back a little bit and take into account these other aspects, and take a more balanced approach.
All right, man. So what we're talking about is we're trying to talk about having a balanced approach, right? And so right now, a lot of Christians are frustrated because in the culture right now, we're seeing people getting married at an older age. We're also seeing less and less people getting married. We're also seeing an increase in divorce rates. And so what a lot of Christians right now are talking about is, well, our reaction is everybody needs to get married as quickly as possible and have babies as quickly as possible. And that'll be our response to the culture, right? Which I think kind of part of what we're talking about here is both of those are not inherently right or wrong, right? At least divorce is never the idea. We never want to pursue that. That's what I'm talking about. But getting married at an older age is not an inherently bad thing. Getting married young is not automatically an inherently good thing, right? There are a lot of people who probably should not get married when they're 20. There are some people, for whatever reason, getting married at 20 is a good idea. But on the flip side, like telling, especially men, because you see this like in a lot of like those like like red pill manosphere kind of stuff, like sleep as many women as you can till you're 40. You've got a great business, all that kind of stuff, and then chill and have kids. Like that's what one sector of the culture is saying. That's obviously those are not good practices. But also the idea, I think at the same time that, well, you need to wait till you have all of life figured out. You got your checks and balances in line, then have a wife and kids is not necessarily the right response either. Because one of the things I think you learn the older you get is you eventually learn how much you don't have figured out what you thought you had figured out.
Yeah.
But like starting to like understand responsibility, like there's wisdom in that, right? Like developing responsibility, growing up and maturing, learning how to take care of somebody, and like kind of like what you're talking about, learning how like, okay, like a young woman's father should be happy that she wants to marry you. He should not be scared about that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That doesn't mean you should already like, you need to have like 2 or 3 houses, like 6 figures in the bank and all those different kind of things. But like, he should get the sense that she will be okay with you. Like, that's usually a good sign. You have a stable job. Like people think people around you think well of you. They speak highly of you. Like those are all like good signs that you are a progressing man, not like a deteriorating boy. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, if you're that at 25 or 30, if you're that at 25, that's awesome and good for you. If you're that at 35, then, well, like, we're glad you got there. That's awesome too. Like that's the kind of like people like men that you want getting married. That's kind of like, I think that's part of what we're talking about. At the same time, I do think, man, that there's a lot of corruption like in Christian higher education. I think that's probably true cross-denominationally. I think seminaries are way too stupid expensive, and it is designed for the students to be overly dependent on other people. Like most master's degrees I know of cross-denominationally, like cost 6 figures. It's hard to like to work a full-time job, take classes, pay for that, and not like be dependent. You know what I'm saying? On the flip side, I think it's weird when seminaries like create situations that are designed for the woman to put her husband through seminary. That's also steps backwards. And so I think if you're like, I don't know, man, I think there's like that system needs to be like revamped. Cause it's not an honor. I don't think it's a good reflection on Christian morals and ethics when seminaries cost more than a lot of like public schools do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. And so one guy and this guy, he commented, on my post, and he and I would probably agree, a lot in this regard. And he suggested, a path for a different kind of path for men to be able to enter into the ministry that isn't going to cost it doesn't cost an arm and a leg. So I don't know, something like the historic diaconate or something like that, right? Which actually some of our sister churches still practice. So, like for example, the Lutheran Church in where is it now? The name is escaping. Serbia. So yeah, they still have this practice where a man, he basically is under a pastor or whatever they refer to them as for however long, and then eventually he himself gets ordained.
Yeah.
That's something,
awesome.
and that's like something that a guy could still theoretically be able to work and provide for his family while working toward entering into the ministry. But so yeah, that's another obvious solution, I think. But I want to go back to your point about the our reaction or overreaction to the culture, because I want to say again that this isn't just some abstract concept for me that I'm like trying to push on people for no good reason. I speak from experience, where my wife and we got married. I think I was 24 or 25. And then we didn't wait all that long to begin trying to have kids. We maybe waited a year or two. I mean, not like we intentionally waited. We just didn't really give a whole lot of thought to it. So by the time we started trying to have kids, well, then we found out, we were dealing with some infertility issues. And so it took us almost 5 years to even achieve a first pregnancy, which resulted in a miscarriage. And then, it wasn't until after that God blessed us with another pregnancy, and now we have 3 kids. But there was a time there where we thought that we were never going to have kids. And so it's, this isn't a topic that I'm just taking lightly. So I encourage all of my friends and anyone, when I get the opportunity, if there's a couple married but not really thinking about kids, I encourage them, don't wait, because you don't know whether it's going to happen or not. You don't know how much time you're going to have to actually, and you will put it off too long, you may end up regretting it. So, I think all that's just to say that, it's not my intent to follow the world's way, to delay marriage and fatherhood for the sake of money, as someone accused me of. Not at all. But just to again count the cost when making these decisions, make wise decisions, take into account all of everything. Take into account everything. Don't just and the reason, and one of the reasons, I talked about, this wasn't my primary argument, but I do think that it's actually probably worse. We probably produce worse pastors for it. So, that same guy suggested that being a pastor is very much to be a husband to the parish and a father to the parishioners. And another person said, I think the context of marriage, family, and total dependence on God is pretty fundamental for studying for the ministry. One of the ways one of my good friends likes to put it is that, I don't want my next pastor spending his years in seminary changing diapers. And I agree with him 100%. In fact, as someone who is, as I mentioned to you before we jumped on, that I just started my parental leave. And it also happens that my oldest, who's in school, is on spring break. So I'm at home with 3 kids right now. And man, it is a lot of work, and it takes up all of my time. And I couldn't imagine trying to study for the office of the Holy Ministry while doing that. Like, I would be either a terrible student or a terrible father, or both. And, so yeah, I don't want someone as my friend would put it, spending his years in seminary changing diapers. What I want is, so the context of marriage and family and all that, first of all, is not fundamental at all for the ministry. In fact, that directly contradicts what Scripture says are the requirements for ministry. But in any case, the context I want my future pastor in seminary in is in the context of, he's there with his brothers in arms, with whom he is being trained up to go out into the world and make war against the devil and the world. I don't want a soft pastor. I want, a pastor who's going to go out there and again, just do battle for the sake of Christ. So, but, I think what we see is quite the opposite. So, to give instead of pastors who are going to take a stand and, remain faithful, instead, what we have are pastors who, when the government, suggests to shut your church down for who knows how long, they just ask how long, and 15 days to flatten the curve, or something like that. So, I think that's what we reap when we aren't telling young boys to first become men, but to just enter into this vocation, do your studies, and forget the rest. So, anyway, yeah, just to get back to your last point, a different route for the ministry, absolutely. Another good solution there, and someone probably has even better ideas than I would about that. But there's a lot we can do to kind of correct the course that we're currently on. I would just have to wholeheartedly disagree that the context of marriage, family, and total dependence is fundamental for studying for the ministry. I got
you, man. I think there's you can fundamental, no, helpful, yes, definitely helpful. But I don't. Yeah, you can't say that's fundamental, man. I think the Apostle Paul's missionary journeys in the churches that he planted and started, is plenty of evidence for that, right? And so, yeah, fundamental, no, but I mean, I think to say it's helpful is fair.
Yeah, it can be. Absolutely. I mean, it is, after all, God's institution for our good. But the Apostle Paul himself says, and he says, "He that is unmarried careth for the things that belong to the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But he that is married careth for the things that are of the world, how he may please his wife." Which is there's no getting around that. And anyone who's married knows that. Yeah, I mean, and it's God pleasing that you care to please your wife, right? But that it shifts the focus, I guess you could say, or so. Yeah, I think all the biblical witness is against that kind of objection.
So there was one more thing I wanted to ask you about, man, and let me see if I can dig it up. I think it was in one of the comments, or it might have been. I think it was, you had mentioned it earlier, but let me see, where was it? Some people just hate having a conversation, man. I don't understand sometimes why people dive into the comments and things.
Oh boy, I think I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, I was like, just keep scrolling, man. Oh man. But like, I think that do appreciate and agree with like your concern though, man, about, because ultimately, like, kind of like a part of what we're talking about here is you're teaching a certain way of living, right? And so there's a reason we have memes about guys who go to seminary to find their wife and they come out single, right? Like there's reasons we have memes about those things. And there's reasons why they talk about in the Bible Belt about when guys who don't know what they want to do with their life, they go to seminary. There's reasons, there's jokes and memes about that kind of thing. And like, you're building a culture with those expectations, right? And there's a lot of problems that come with that. And part of your concern about building like weak men to lead God's church, like that's ultimately what you're cultivating and you're building there. And like that, there's a problem with that. And like, that's how you end up getting, like you were talking about these weak pastors, when the government says jump, they say, how high, master, right? Like that's a problem. That's how you get like a record number of pastors leaving the ministry every single year. How you get pastors record numbers in depression, pastors in record numbers in loneliness, like pastors in record numbers, like over like, and this data is like cross denominational, right? Like that's how you get in these situations. Like you get untrained men in positions where they don't know what to do and they haven't grown, they haven't matured, and they're not ready for an incredibly like heavy like task before them.
Yeah, it's this whole idea of being dependent, rather than being a man. I mean, that's kind of because this whole idea of dependence. So this actually did come up too in the comments at one point. I don't remember exactly how this went, but so Christ is the model man, the perfect man, the epitome of masculinity. And what he does is he gives himself entirely to the point of death for his bride, the church. And we, the church, as his bride, receive his good gifts. So to receive, to be dependent, is a feminine trait. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong. God made masculine and feminine to receive from Christ all that he has and gives to us. And so what one person said, or an objection he made, was that, well, something along the lines of that, well, we're completely and we're totally dependent on God for everything. And, therefore it's perfectly fine to be in this kind of state of utter dependence in the situation in which I'm describing. And well, so what he's saying is that that it's perfectly fine for men, or I guess young boys, to act feminine in this situation, to act. So we're teaching them not masculinity, but femininity. Is what we're encouraging them to. And and in which case, in this case, it's not actually a kind of a godly feminine trait, if you will. Instead, it becomes effeminacy, which is distinct from femininity, and is not good. Uh, God would not have us to be effeminate, but that's basically what we're uh, pushing young boys to. Other guys of various ages, as in those situations that you described.
Hey, what's up, citizens? I needed to pop in here for a quick minute and basically close out this video. In this episode, we had a lot of tech issues. And by we, I mean I had a lot of tech issues. I had internet problems and just a variety of different things. And so I think our editor did a really good job in handling the situation. But at the end of the recording, apparently it just kind of blacked out on us. And so, for all of y'all that made it this far, please comment below that you made it and let us know if you would like for us to do another segment, like a part two on this topic. Me and Mark had a great conversation. It was a lot of fun. And I wish it could have gone on for like 3 or 4 hours, but that's just that's not the kind of time that we have in real life. And so, just wanted to pop in here and share that with y'all. But y'all already know. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, click the bell, like the video, and drop a comment below and let us know if y'all would like for us to continue this conversation and continue this topic.